or a demo video on creating an intro draft, I wanted to return to 5 Ways of Looking at a Thesis by Eric Sampson, and then to talk about my draft of the essay, Irving's Bosom. So I think we've covered the something strange part, and I just wanted to go to the looking at, well, first of all, actually we'll start with 3, the magic thesis sentence. By looking at blank, we can see blank, which most readers don't see. This is important because I have to sneeze. Okay, remember I said at the beginning of the semester, like I can't do too many retakes, so I'm not going to start over because of a sneeze. But I do want to indicate that what this magic thesis sentence is asking you for is a complex thesis statement that indicates the evidence that you're going to be looking at, and what you're going to learn by looking at it, and then why or so what. I'm not going to look at these examples. I'm going to invite you to read that yourself. But here we are in the thesis. So 2 points to keep in mind. Builds an argument that moves from one point to the next, magic thesis sentence, and then also makes a lot of information irrelevant. I think we have that last point covered. This essay is very sort of narrow, right? And that's what I'm looking for from you too, is something that's going to be pretty focused on a select set of evidence, but always within the context of the whole. So here I've written up a lot of that discussion that I had in the video, and it's expanding on the intro draft. And basically what it reflects is like, I spent some time thinking about this, like, really sort of like puzzling through like what's going on with all of this, the indigeneity, the feminine industry, the masculine invasion, the repercussions for that invasion. It's all kind of like laid out through imagery in the first passages, and that's what made me curious. It's my what up with that moment that became that thesis question. And here you see I've crossed out the question: how does the introduction of this opposition or contradiction, feminine, masculine, etc., set up the action of the story that follows? So this is what I've now written for my introductory paragraph. And you can see how it develops the intro draft that I shared with you. The opening section of Washington Irving's The Legend of Sleepy Hollow is notable for its tension between tranquility and violence. This tension is encapsulated by the so-called headless horseman of Sleepy Hollow. On the one hand, a masculine action figure decapitated. On the other, the feminine passive landscape, seemingly personified by a will to inaction. So I'm just, same thing I said in the intro paragraph. And it seems to be impregnated with supernatural violence, and that diction there of impregnated is consonant with the idea of masculine and feminine in imagery. These passages set up the action of the story by symbolically representing the masculine defenders of the bosom of Sleepy Hollow against invading strangers, and the changes they represent, subsequently personified in the contest between the native Brum Bones. So he's kind of like, if you remember that idea of constructing indigeneity, he's like made into an indigenous defender, and the invader Ichabod Crane over the Katrina Van Tassel, who is the the bosom and the cove, right? So how does that work with the magic thesis statement? It's by looking at these passages, we can see the anticipation of the plot of the story. And why is this important? I think we could use a little bit more and this is still a draft, to explain like the so what part. But at least what I'm doing here is telling you what we're looking at and what we're going to see that most people don't see, because I bet you didn't take note of all of this. I know I didn't the first time that you read the story, right? And then what follows, I'm not going to read the whole thing, is a series of argumentative claims, right? But the point that I really want to emphasize is that the order in which you're reading it is not the same as the order in which I wrote it. Underneath here, I have like Put this back in suggestion mode. I have those same passages that I had selected to analyze, and I build up the analysis of those. I really sort of think about what's going on, and then I come up with this claim. So the order of production is evidence, analysis, assertion, and the order of the writing, the way this reads is assertion, citation, explanation, right? But I'm not proving my point through providing evidence to prove my point. I'm developing a point through my analysis of evidence. The figurative femininity or feminine figurality, that's just being dumb, of the land and an antagonistic ambivalent relation with men are introduced right from the beginning of the tale. Okay, so we've talked about it, and you can see how I'm going to parse that out in the analysis, and most of this ends up being analysis. I do note, and this is different from the intro draft, I looked up bosom in the OED, and I found that it often means like lap and not necessarily breast, or even like womb, and I invoke the archaic sense and actually have a citation from the OED. So this is very much setting up Sleepy Hollow as this private female sanctum. And you notice that the assertion is really sort of like pointing to the evidence and the place where the evidence is found, which is right at the beginning. And then the second paragraph, I have an analysis of the second paragraph, in which Knickerbocker recounts his visit to Sleepy Hollow, offhandedly indicates both its quietude and the repercussions of disturbing it, his gunshot and those angry echoes, right? The squirrel shooting is a sort of symbolic foreshadowing. If the retort to, and here we see a transition from the previous paragraph, the retort to Knickerbocker's rifle is automatically, seemingly issued by the land itself. The next step in Irving's setup for the action of Sleepy Hollow is to populate that landscape with domestic defenders. So here's where I get into the Sleepy Hollow bones and how they're all figuratively Aboriginal, and that's where I bring in the sort of the native studies perspective on the story, or the settler colonial studies perspective. But you can see how this develops out of my close reading analysis. Again, pointing towards the evidence, it's an interpretive claim about evidence rather than an abstract interpretive claim or a descriptive claim. At the story's climax, the superstitious Ichabod will be the victim of a local tale about a previous intruder, a Hessian trooper, during a Revolutionary War battle that took place at that very spot. That's maybe a little too descriptive, and I want to sort of articulate my point. But it's interesting to think about this, like how the cannonball that knocked off the trooper's head is a foreshadowing of the, sort of like literally represented by the pumpkin that nearly takes off Ichabod's head, maybe. But one thing I want to make clear is that I haven't figured everything out, and it's what I've done is shown how the beginning of the story anticipates the rest of it and maybe provides a better understanding, and maybe this is so what of what's actually at stake in the action of the Legend of Sleepy Hollow. I think I would go back and revise that some more. Again, this is just a draft, but as I say at the end here, it's difficult to sort out the imagery and its implications, but we can see how the opening paragraphs contain the symbolic elements that play out in the narrative that follows. I don't need to figure everything out and reach some sort of conclusive analysis. It's okay to be a little bit speculative, as long as you're meeting these criteria, which are the criteria I'm going to ask you to look at in your feedback on your one another's intro drafts. And I'm sorry if this is kind of a challenging way to approach an essay assignment, but that's what I want it to be. Okay.